It's common for ufologists to date the beginning of the modern UFO wave to the famous Kenneth Arnold sighting of June 1947. But while Arnold's sighting certainly marked a turning point in UFO history, it was far from the first sighting of something unusual in the sky. In early 1942, a number of unidentified lights and craft were spotted over and around the city of Los Angeles. One of these objects reportedly hovered over the city for an hour, invoking sporadic fire from multiple anti-aircraft guns, and it was even captured on photograph. The object later vanished, and its identity was never revealed, but the so-called Battle of Los Angeles has lived on in popular culture as a reminder of the long history of the UFO phenomenon, and as a revealing case study in the government's handling of it before the proliferation of military intelligence agencies in the post-war era. On the night of February 24, 1942, just over 2 months after the US's entry into the Second World War, American naval intelligence issued a warning of an imminent attack on US soil. Military outposts across Southern California were put on alert, but by 10:30 p.m., it was apparent that no such attack had taken place, and the alert was lifted. But in the early hours of February 25th, multiple radar stations tracked an uncorrelated target 120 miles west of Los Angeles, over the Pacific Ocean. As the target closed in on the shoreline around 2:15 a.m., the regional controller ordered a blackout over LA and put all anti-aircraft batteries on green alert. The Air Force, however, declined to scramble planes until they could better assess the threat. The object never seemed to reach shore, but for hours after, the information center was bombarded with reports of aircraft in the area. One Coast Artillery colonel even claimed to spot a fleet of 25 planes. Then, shortly after 3 a.m., reports came in of an object over Santa Monica, and 4 batteries around LA opened fire. The barrage lasted for nearly an hour until 4:14 a.m., and the all-clear was given around 7. Despite firing well over 1,000 rounds, the batteries failed to shoot anything down. Reports of the incident varied greatly, and many were in direct contradiction to one another. Some witnesses reported slow-moving objects. Others reported objects traveling at speeds in excess of 200 miles per hour. Some reported hundreds of planes flying over the state. Still others reported a single low-flying stationary object, left unscathed by multiple direct hits from artillery fire. Sighting conditions were poor, however, and grew worse as more and more artillery fire filled the sky with smoke. It's likely that many people mistook exploding rounds and clouds of smoke for planes. It is impossible now to determine exactly what passed over LA that night, if anything at all, but one remarkable and fortunate photo offers some insights. The famous photograph of the so-called Battle of LA, a touched-up version of which was published in the LA Times on February 26, 1942, seems to show a solid object in the focus of multiple spotlight beams, thus corroborating reports of a stationary object. In the aftermath of the incident, however, little was known for certain, and the American military could not seem to offer a satisfactory explanation. Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox, held a press conference the day of the incident to report that the entire thing had been a false alarm, and that no objects had entered American airspace at all. However, the American Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, offered a different explanation after gathering the results of some interviews with witnesses. In what became the official explanation of the War Department, Stimson explained that there were up to 5 reconnaissance planes over California that night, either launched from secret facilities on land or deployed from offshore submarines. The Japanese were assumed to be responsible, but they denied that they had anything to do with the incident after their surrender. Few were satisfied with the explanations offered up by the Navy or the War Department, and press coverage was critical and questioning. If there were truly 5 unidentified aircraft over a major American city, why were no American fighters scrambled? Where were the enemy planes deployed from? And what were they doing if not staging a direct attack? An opinion piece in the New York Times on February 28th accused the American military of handling the crisis with inefficacy and incompetence, regardless of which explanation was assumed. The military maintained a nearly unbroken silence throughout the controversy, and the incident eventually faded from public memory. In 1983, the Office of Air Force History published a review of the incident, suggesting that meteorological balloons had been responsible for many of the aircraft's sightings. Many sources today side with Secretary Knox, however, and chalk the entire incident up to a case of war nerves and general inexperience with the air raid scenario. However, controversy remains over what was photographed in the center of the spotlight beams. Contemporary photos of unobstructed, crossed spotlight beams clearly show that the beams continue through the point of convergence, even in smoky conditions. A recent recreation of the photograph on the sci-fi series Fact or Faked showed the same thing. An analysis of the original unedited photograph by ufologist and optical physicist Dr. Bruce Maccabee shows how some of the beams are actually being reflected off the object and directed back up into the sky, suggesting that the object's surface was highly lustrous. Something was in the sky that night, and Maccabee's analysis, together with the fact that 1,400 rounds of ammunition couldn't bring it down, suggests that it was no mere weather balloon. We may never know what triggered the Battle of Los Angeles, but there is still great value in bringing this case to mind. Its timing, 5 years before the famous Kenneth Arnold sighting of 1947, reminds us that the UFO phenomenon was not simply invented in the heat of the flying saucer frenzy, as skeptics allege. And the iconic LA Times photograph is an important piece of evidence in the case against the official explanation of the UFO phenomenon. Whether authorities were aware of the UFO phenomenon at the time is unclear, but as ufologist Richard Dolan has pointed out, the Battle of LA was an important lesson in secrecy, one from which the American government seems to have learned a great deal.